Welcome back to Munchausen's Proxy, where the long American nightmare of the Writers Guild of America strike is over. What strike, you ask? Yeah, that's about how most people took the people responsible for the current state of Hollywood taking their ball and going home until they get their way. You will be glad to hear, however, that the writers and studios have reached a deal and the strike is over. The Hollywood Reporter's Katie Kilkenny and Leslie Goldberg penned an article explaining the details of the deal reached. What was it all for? Well, money as usual. However, unlike these things usually are, there actually were other, bigger things at stake. Let's go over the details of the tentative agreement awaiting a full WGA membership vote. First and foremost is the money. The deal would run, like most of its kind, for 3 years, during which the writers have secured raises of a minimum of 5% in the first year, 4% the second year, and 3.5% the final year of the deal. They are also getting higher foreign residuals, which is a fancy word for money paid out to the writers when the show or movie they worked on gets shown on television or cable or streaming, overseas. Although streaming is a different issue of the deal. Every time that a show or movie makes money by being shown, the writers get paid a little slice of that pie. Another major point in the strike, and one that most probably at least understand the writers' concerns about, is AI. The union has secured protection against the studios using artificial intelligence to write or rewrite original material or used by studios as a source material that the writers would be working off of. Meaning, the studios have promised not to have AI write their scripts or write up treatments or rough drafts that the writers they hire then come back over and smooth out the rough spots that AI can't quite manage on its own just yet. Writers themselves are allowed to use AI as a tool if the company they work for allows it. However, the company cannot require they use it, and the company must disclose if the material they are giving writers to work on comes from AI. They also got the studios to agree that, quote, the WGA reserves the right to assert that exploitation of writers' material to train AI is prohibited by NBA or other law. Unquote. Meaning the union can sue if they find out the studios are using their members' work to train the computers to replace the writers. Another major point that most neutral parties agreed with the unions on was their desire to get the actual numbers for streaming so they can fairly base compensation on something tangible. Streamers have hidden their actual streaming numbers behind heavy security, unwilling to allow anyone to see them. Many, myself included, have speculated that it was because they would reveal that the streamers were lying their asses off to investors, which is a big no-no where the Securities and Exchange Commission is concerned. Lying to investors gets you thrown in federal prison. Instead of getting a deal like they used to for broadcast, cable, and home video numbers, a more complicated formula was agreed upon. The residuals would be tied to the show or movie's viewing success. Not getting the union proposal to, quote, establish a viewership-based residual, in addition to existing fixed residuals, to reward programs with greater viewership, unquote, and to, quote, require transparency regarding program views, unquote, a compromise was reached. Studios agreed to reward projects that, quote, are viewed by 20% or more of the service's domestic subscribers in the first 90 days of release, or in the first 90 days in any subsequent exhibition year, unquote. Straight-to-streaming movies and shows will require a bonus of 50% of its fixed domestic and foreign residual once it hit the benchmark, giving bonuses like $9,031 for a half-hour episode on major streaming services and $40,500 for streaming feature with a budget topping $30 million. The union's success on actual transparency of streaming numbers was limited, however. The union will have confidential access to, quote, total number of hours streamed both domestically and internationally of self-produced high-budget streaming programs, example, a Netflix original series, unquote, and, quote, may share information with the members in an aggregated form, unquote. This means a sliding scale of residuals paid out to writers after their show or movie pops above a certain viewership number. And while the unions will get access to certain raw numbers to make sure the streamers aren't cheating their members out of residuals, they are not getting the actual and complete raw viewership numbers. And it will all be under confidential processes that I'm sure the streamers will have wrapped in a non-disclosure agreement and threats of lawsuits should the numbers find their way into the media or online. While it might seem like a huge win for the union, those viewership thresholds for increased pay will probably exclude most writers on most shows and movies on streaming. Consider the subscription numbers for Netflix, say, and how high the viewership has to get to reach 20% for the writers in the first 90 days of release. The main point at which I scoffed at the beginning of this exercise in collectivism was the union's insistence on minimum staffing in writers' rooms. They not only wanted a set number of writers on shows, this was mostly about series writing, but they wanted guarantees for minimum amount of time those writers would be hired. The unions wanted at least 6 writers on staff, with an additional scribe for every 2 episodes, with a maximum of 12 writers for pre-series order scripted programs. The studios whittled them down to a minimum of 3 writers-producers for a first season show running 20 weeks or longer. They also got a formula tied to additional seasons tied to the number of episodes per season. The unions claimed that they were so keen on this minimum writer room staff size to prevent studios using AI to save costs on scribes. The union also got guaranteed minimum of 10 consecutive weeks, post-greenlight writing rooms getting 20 weeks or the duration of the room. The studios also agreed to an increase of their contributions to the union's health fund, going from 11.5% to 12%. And finally, they also agreed to take a second step in their deals with writers, quote, whenever a writer is hired for a first draft screenplay for 200% of minimum or less, including original and non-original screenplays, unquote. Importantly, the studios refused to agree to allow the Writers Guild of America members to honor other picket lines by other unions. This means that the verbal agreement between the WGA and SAG-AFTRA, the actors union, that they would remain united until both got a deal, is now being called into question. The WGA members cannot remain on strike to support the actors without incurring penalties once their deal is signed. Importantly, the Teamsters and IATSE, the stagehand union, are scheduled to go head-to-head with the studios next year when their contracts end. Strikes for one or both unions are anticipated. Should they happen, the writers will not be allowed to stop meeting their contracts under this proposed deal in order to support those union strikes. While on the outside, it would seem the writers got much of what they wanted. Some who follow Hollywood closely think the effects of this strike will wind up making it a wash, or even a loss, for the writers. Anticipate fewer shows, shorter seasons, and probably worsening quality overall. I know. How can what Hollywood is producing get worse? It is also speculated that the studios caved on some of the points that they were opposed to so vehemently at the beginning because they are planning a harder stance 3 years from now when AI is better able to replace writers. At the moment, AI scripts come out sounding like a third grader copy and pasted from other, better sources, which is about what they are. Give the tech 3 years and that probably won't be so. Unlike the directors union, the writers and actors unions allow any schlub who can pay the dues to be a member, meaning the roles of both the WGA and SAG-AFTRA are bloated with talentless hacks who nonetheless get to bitch about not making a living at writing and acting. There are also a lot of people in both unions coasting on the quota system both unions support. quotas for both the members' demographic characteristics and quotas for hiring more people than the studios really need. Both systems bloat the budgets of Hollywood productions, thereby increasing the break-even points for movies and the level of success needed for shows to continue both on television and on streaming. There are other, less obvious things unions require of studios that also contribute to such bloating. None of it was addressed by either strike, meaning it will continue. The end result of it all will be the eventual implosion of Hollywood under the weight of its own political, cultural, and collectivist anchors. Until someone or something comes along to cut some of those anchors loose, the death spiral will continue. Expect the studios to come to an agreement with the actors post-haste, meaning Hollywood is back in business. For now. That is all I have for this video. If you like what I do here, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, share the video, and comment down below. I appreciate it all. Until next time. Tschüss.